Okay, so now we're going to start the second part of the morning session focused on place-based design and architecture. And in this session, we have 4 cases, or 4 angles on 2 cases, you might say, both from Denmark. So the first session here, I would like to invite Stig Hesselund on stage. He's part of Realdania. And everywhere I turn, when I've been looking for examples of the stuff that we found in Sustain Nordic, I find Realdania somehow connected. So, and you're here to talk about the veje til biobaseret byggeri, which is one of your cases. So, please take a mic. And
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Stig. I'm from Denmark. I hope a lot of you can understand my slides because I haven't had time to translate them, so they're in Danish. I'm from something called Realdania, and I'll talk a little bit about bio-based and place-based architecture. I'm also introducing for a project that we funded called Hedeskov, Center for Regenerative Practice, and I won't get a lot into the specific project. I'll leave that to Justine and Sophie, but I will introduce a little bit about how we in Realdania work with the place and bio-based architecture. So first, just for the ones of you not from Denmark, who is Realdania? We're a philanthropic organization. Our roots go all the way back to the fire in Copenhagen in 1795, where the Danish real estate funding business was established, and then Realkredit Denmark was sold in the year 2000, and with the 10 billion Danish crowns in profits, Realdania was started, and since then we've dealt out nearly 25 billion Danish crowns in philanthropic support. We have nearly 25 billions in our reserves, and yearly it's around between half and 1 billion crowns. And we work problem solving in order to create quality of life through the built environment. And we support a wide variety of analysis, knowledge, actual projects, landscape projects, processes, networks, etc. We have 6 philanthropic goals, and the 2 of the 6 that's relevant today is the place-bound potentials. That's what takes the starting point from the immediate physical surroundings, the buildings, the available resources, but also the culture and the practice in the area, and of course also healthy, effective, and sustainable building. These are all getting revised right now, so January next year they'll look different. The key parts will be the same, of course. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about an initiative called Pathways to Bio-Based Building. In this initiative, we're trying to see what it actually takes to scale the use of Danish-grown crops for them to become buildings. And in Denmark, that's mainly looking at agricultural crops, because we're not as lucky as the Swedes. We don't have a lot of forests. We have like 14% of the Danish area, and a lot of that will need that for biodiversity purposes. I'm not going to go very deep into these diagrams. I'm just going to show you that we work with both knowledge, innovation, example projects, and of course communication, like me standing here in front of you. The first phase was about which crops we should use, how does the value chains look, how could they potentially look, the material properties, etc. And in the following phase, what we're about to start now, we'll be looking much more into creating networks of producers, like companies wanting to create enterprises that actually produce hemp, straw, grass products, and also make sure that we test them in order to fully document those solutions. And in the end, we'll be funding example buildings for everybody to go out there, to touch them, to see that it's actually potentially an even more attractive way of building than what we're doing today. Okay, I'll go into these fairly number-heavy slides. I hope you can follow me. I'm just gonna introduce the team behind the Pathways to Bio-Based Building. We have Copenhagen University, Aarhus University, Smith Innovation, a consultancy firm, Artilia Engineers, Aalborg University, SINARC, that's part of the Royal Danish Academy of Arts, and Yaya Architects. So this is a very broad team, and we're trying to cast light on all the aspects of bio-based building. We have on the Real Dania website, we have a lot of new reports coming out. You just Google veje til biobaseret byggeri, and you'll be brought right to our site. Okay. I trust you all know this. It's a brilliant Swede, Johan Rockström, came up with these planetary boundaries. We haven't been so brilliant in actually adjusting to the fact that we have planetary boundaries. Since the term was coined in 2009, the following 15 years, we actually moved further and further away from being within the planetary boundaries. We need to do something different. And the easiest way of doing this, probably the only realistic way of creating a difference here, is photosynthesis. We're catching CO2 from the air. We're creating an actual renewable resource of materials. But there's a lot of dilemmas. There's a lot of dilemmas around area use, where to grow this, where to grow food, where to have solar cells. So that's basically the point of the project, to look into all those dilemmas and create scenarios that kind of look at the potential. So we ask the questions: how many renewable materials do we actually need in the building sector in Denmark? Could we be self-sufficient with renewable building materials in Denmark? And what would a large use of local bio-based materials, what would that mean for the climate impact of Denmark as a whole, and what would it mean for other sectors if the building sector needs more bio-based material? So I'm just going to start with a short introduction of different ways of utilizing biogenic carbon. If you look at 1 hectare of straw, during its growth phase, it has actually stored 5 tons of CO2. If you bury it after harvesting, you use the grain and then you bury the straws. If you bury it, 90% of the CO2 is re-emitted to the atmosphere. If you burn it, of course, it's 100% re-emitted. If you use pyrolysis, you get bio-oil for the hard-to-abate sectors like flying, but you also get biochar, which you can then bury in the ground, and we end up with re-emitting 72%. But actually the far easiest, the far cheapest way of storing the biogenic carbon is to produce boarding, to produce insulation, putting it into bio-based actual buildings, and make sure that you build it right, and then it can store nearly 90% of the biogenic carbon. The problem is we don't have this bio-based production system. You're ahead of us again in Sweden with the, for instance, ecolution. Naib is gonna dive more into that. But let's say let's say for the grown area, for the farmers, there are advantages in terms of we can, for the building sector can create a market of reduced emission crops. We can tie carbon in the ground, and we can go from mono to more multicultural crop growing. And in terms of a new production system, we can actually have more local workplaces within the green transition. We can work with new models of ownership and actually potentially look at exports as well. And for the building sector, of course, we can reduce by substituting. We can substitute concrete, steel, brick. We can store carbon, and we can maybe at some point get to a point where we do more good than harm by building. We're not there yet. So this is showing basically how we use our produce from the forestry and from the farming today. Most of the farming ends up as animal feed, and most of the forest ends up being burned. And we need to change that. We need to use more of the land use, for instance, for biorefining, and then the residual mass will use that for production into buildings. The same with forestry, right to the sawmill, to production, and into the building sector. Of course, we'll also use the farming products for food, but if you notice that the vector is now circumventing the animal production, that's much more efficient. In Denmark, there's a lot of potential. We have the possibility to grow a lot of different wooden crops. We also have, especially from year to year, the possibility to transition to fast renewable crops like straw, cattail, hemp, elephant grass, flax, clover grass, mycelium, etc. And also our marine resources like eelgrass and mussel shells are quite interesting. And today, the problem is we already use all of our country. So where are we going to grow these crops? We use 60% of the country for farming today, and we only have 3% protected nature. And on top of the whole country already being utilized, we import 20%, or correspondingly to 20% of the Danish area in wood chip for our district heating, and we import 14% of the Danish area, or correspondingly to 14% of the Danish area for soy for pig feed. So we're fully booked, and on top of that, we also need the solar cells. We need to remove some ground that's being flooded. We need to protect our groundwater. We need windmills. We need to erect new forests, and we need 1.5 times the area that we actually have. But before we get to the unsolvable puzzle, we're just going to look a little bit at how much do we actually need in the building industry. And in the building industry, we're the biggest user of material. We're actually bigger than the industry and the farming. And one way to go about this is to look at what we're actually building. These are typologies. The one that we build the most is single-family housing. That accounts to nearly 30% of the built area every year in Denmark. From these typologies, we can translate that into different building parts. For instance, roof, inner walls, outer walls, etc. And then we can translate that into materials. Insulation, bricks, mortar, etc. And then when we have the materials, we can start looking at, okay, where can we then replace the materials? Which materials can we replace with bio-based building materials. But apart from that, we also need to have the discussion as how much do we actually need in the future? How much are we going to build in the future? We can say we continue the line of an average throughout the past 50 years. Looks like this, upgoing curve. We can also say it's the last 5 years or 10 years, and then it's even more steep upgoing curve. Or we can say that maybe there will be some sort of political intervention, and we'll tap the brakes just a little bit. And more people are discussing how would it actually look if we stopped building new in Denmark. To solve this, we also need information on how productive are the individual crops. We need to look at hemp, straw, clovergrass, fir, a lot of other things as well. This is just a cross-section. This is looking at how much insulation can we actually get from 1 hectare of crops. You can see that hemp is really productive, but actually clovergrass, because you can harvest it 4 times every year, really has potential, but there's no real, there's no products out there today. This is completely uncharted territory. We can do the same for boards, for construction boards, and again comparing straw, elephant grass, willow, and pine, and we can see that actually elephant grass and willow is much more efficient per hectare per year than traditional forestry, which is interesting, but we don't have the products. So just to illustrate, we can actually cover the need of wooden materials in the Danish building industry by having a pine forest on 12% of the Danish area. That's really heavily, it's a plantation, it's not a biodiverse forest. But really only 1 to 2%, maybe 4% of the Danish area needs to be covered by fast-growing crops, and then we have enough for insulation and boarding. This is not a lot, and this should really. We only need the wooden products if we want to keep building new. We need that for load-bearing constructions. So this is my final slide before I leave the floor to the case. This is comparing 2 different scenarios on a total for the whole of Denmark. One that's production oriented and one that's nature driven. The first one, we reduce our material need with 25%, and we can actually continue having a building practice that's based on wood. Then we would get 1 million tons of CO2 saved every year, and 2 million tons of CO2 stored in our products, and we would get 13% of nature. In the other, where we say that nature is the objective, we lower the material need with 50%. We only use the woods for where we actually need it for load-bearing constructions. We save a little bit more, 1.3 million tons. We store a little bit less, but then we get the 30% of nature that is the objective in the European Union. And we need to read what's in the bottom. The prerequisites of this is that we've reduced our animal produce by 50%. We've transitioned from burning wood chip in our district heating. We've replaced that with heat pumps. We've transitioned the building sector. We've made a strategic reconfiguration of 50% of the Danish area, and we've planted 250,000 hectares of forest. That is a radical transformation. But the hope is that right now a lot of the discussion in Denmark will maybe look at research like this and be inspired towards making a more locally based building sector that actually look at crops we can grow without having a detrimental effect to our climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Stig. And thanks for this very dense presentation. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but I'm going to ask you to hold on to those, and then we'll have a conversation afterwards with all of the cases involved. So hold on to your questions. And this sounds really implementable. I guess we just need the political frames to support that. That's a different question, I guess. So next up here we have Sofia to present the case. Sofia Aagaard, who is the co-founder and co-owner of Hedeskov Center for Regenerative Agriculture.
Yes.
And please, practice
Yeah.
agriculture. That's because I'm usually talking about that. So, there you go. And you change the slides manually here.
Yes. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Works.
My name is Sofia Aagaard, and I am here representing Hedeskov Center for Regenerative Practice as co-owner and co-founder of the center. Before diving into what we do and what we work with, I want to start off by telling a little bit about our why and how it all started. The center's journey began over 40 years ago in the early 80s when my parents started buying and restoring conventionally farmed land around their estate in western Denmark. At this time, they didn't know much about agriculture and farming. They just knew that they wanted to keep their children and surroundings free of artificial pesticides. And while they had this urge to buy and restore land, they kept it as a hobby, while they built careers in the health sector, also establishing a fertility clinic. And it was through their scientific and medical work that they experienced firsthand the documented link between artificial pesticides and human fertility, the harm it has on human fertility. And this experience not only it deepened their commitment to natural practices, but it also highlighted a much bigger picture. The way we farm, the way we build, and the way we consume has tremendous harmful impacts on the environment. And while sustainability is crucial, it's no longer enough on its own. To truly address the environmental crisis, we have to actively focus on restoring and regenerating what we lost. Fortunately, regenerative practices or principles are increasingly accepted or recognized as ways of addressing the climate changes, the loss of biodiversity, and also all the challenges we see in food security. So in short, what started as a hunch and also has been 40 years of learnings has turned into Hedeskov's why. I think we're all familiar with the term regenerative, which generally means shifting from a model of extraction to one of restoration, where we give more than we take. However, there's no, shared language or shared term, definition of the term, leaving it open to interpretation. At Hedeskov, one of our missions is to try and create this shared language for regenerative principles, as we believe that that's the only way to make them applicable and also measurable in order to move forward. And I want to say that we're in the early stages, so if any of you have any input, we're always open to inputs. Today, over 40 years after we started, we have a portfolio and land allowing us to understand and implement regenerative principles across various fields, both agriculture and construction, organization, product development, and also the role of art and aesthetics in regeneration, which I think is really important. We have our central building complex that we've spent 3 years transforming. This now includes event spaces and office spaces and a research and art residency, and also a private residence. And this is the project that Justine will elaborate on later. Additionally, we today manage 180 hectares of farmland, where 100 hectares are dedicated to agriculture, and then the remaining is dedicated to old and new forestry. We also have 2 farms, Sandmosegård, which is our primary production farm, and then we have Gretbjerggård, which we plan to use as a test farm for an extended exploration of the holistic approach between agriculture and architecture. And I will briefly touch base on 3 of our main projects that we're working on currently. We have the Hedskov Living Lab, where we live test place-based and local materials in a renovation context. And then we have the Regenerative Kitchen, where we investigate the health benefits of consuming foods produced regeneratively compared to industrially processed food. And then we have our Hedskov Research and Production Lab, where we just completed it, but we're planning on growing vegetables and greens, and also focusing on natural pesticides and fertilizer. And this project is part of the EU project Soil Values, where we test how you can make it financially profitable for young farmers to go the regenerative way instead of the traditional way of farming. Yes. And with that said, our mission at Hedskov is to create sustained long-term value for nature and humans by facilitating regenerative practices so that they spread. And last slide from me. To ensure that we succeed with this mission and achieve the long-term impact that we're hoping for, we've developed a focused approach centered around 3 components. And one is that with the projects we do, we want to demonstrate value. And the projects we do at Hedskov are all grounded in practical experience, but also in research. We connect with others. We understand that partnerships and external resources are of great value to the work we do. And finally, but not the least important, we share knowledge. This is super important. We do this through events and exhibitions at Hedskov, as well as through publications and a new membership platform that we're currently making. And the aim is to make regenerative principles as accessible for people as possible. And I would say, before giving the word to Justine, an example of these 3 components in action is the transformation of the school building of the former school building that we have done in a collaborative project with Realdania and Janus and Bell, and also built from Aarhus University. And Justine, who's been deeply involved in this project, will now also share more about how our approach to agriculture and nature has helped shape the transformation of the former school into what it is today.
Thank you. And I think you made the perfect segue to Justine, so please take the floor, Justine. I think the mic should be on,
Thank you.
and you have to operate
This
it.
one doesn't work?
It doesn't work.
Okay.
So yeah,
Down there.
there you go.
Hello. My name is Justine Bell, and I'm partner in a Danish architectural practice where we're quite young as a practice, and our focus has always been the already existing. We do not build new. We work contextually. We're very interested in the principles of the regenerative, which is why we were so delighted when Hillsgård reached out to us and explained the quite remarkable story, which usually when I give lectures I don't have Sophie to tell the story even better than I can. So now you've heard it, and they said, can you translate this into a building renovation? And we said, sure. So I'll try and show you how we tried to do that and how I feel that we have succeeded in some ways, and we hope that the building and the larger project of Hillsgård will be some sort of demonstrator, but also allow for new forms of iterative practice and cross-disciplinary practice and long-time forms of collaboration, which I think are themes all required to ensure place-based architecture and landscape is the way we transition to. So the lecture is entitled Making Good, Reparative Ecologies in the Djursland Bioregion. Hillsgård story you heard from Sophie. I think when you employ an architect, you don't expect the first image to be some scans of a mineral core in the region and a very old painting, but we were interested in these as how could we, in a new sense, perhaps not in a vernacular sense, translate the landscape into the building and make the landscape and the very long time leading up to the creation of the landscape, the habits of its people, of the craft, of the community, make this felt in the building. So in order to do this, we believe also that time is crucial, a larger understanding of time and actual what processes have been involved in the creation of a specific place. We like to look at geological maps, and here you can see a map of Hillsgård, and it's located on the stationary line for the last glaciation. You can see some of the specific resources located in the soil. But historically, it's also necessary to look at the economy of a place and which structures have formed, what is there today, specifically in Denmark and in the context of Djursland, farmland and agriculture. And I'm sure as many of you will know that we have been very intensely producing and changing our landscapes. The hydrological extraction is very dramatic, as you can see here. One of actually Denmark's second biggest lakes, the Kolin Sound, was drained by a bunch of speculators from Copenhagen that thought they could sell some small plots. Funnily enough, it has not been successful. Now these regions are suffering with huge flooding. So it's interesting to look at what are the larger context of the economy. How have we been working with land use and landscapes? And as we often look towards historical building crafts, also looking at the realities of the vernacular, not always poetic, the extraction of minerals, but also the extraction of peat have not served us very well. Most of our lack of trees is also due to the building culture, which is shared across a large part of Northern Europe. This drawing is actually Swedish, I believe, but the point here is to understand that over a very long time we've been able to read our landscapes in buildings. Some regional vernacular practices are more regenerative than others, but all this research forms part of our understanding, and as we see it, this material storytelling, which should be part of how we work when we're working with existing buildings, existing landscapes, existing stories, and sharing them for the future to give their iteration and their interpretation. On this specific project, we recommended reaching out to Local Works, who are a close collaborator of us, and asking them to do a landscape audit. We think the way they work is revolutionary, and they work in a landscape and building crafts background meets in a new, I would say, bioregional mapping technique. So where we together assessed the parts of the buildings that would not be maintained due to them requiring new thermal or new fire or new acoustic performance, but also looking at the landscapes and looking beyond at what nature-based or ecological materials could be found. I think other than only looking at resources, this way of working requires one to create a relationship with the landscape, with the water, with the climate, and with the habits that have shaped this over time. Here we are holding on to some typha, some bulrush fibers, which eventually got used in the building as a reinforcement of the clay plasters. Here looking at the moraine clays, which have come from this last glaciation, so relatively recent glacial event that has left these very useful deposits for building, but also looking at what is within the old building that could be upcycled and given another 100 years of life, or hopefully more, in new building parts. So looking at this way of working bioregionally, the local knowledge is very important, which is why we also suggested partnering with local building craftsmen that were relative experts in the areas of masonry and carpentry-based building crafts, but also with the help of the client's knowledge from having been there for 40 years, Local Works coming with their knowledge, the craftsmen also coming with theirs. There's been mapping different parts of resources from a material, nature-based, crafts-based, community-based. So just to name a few, the Copenhagen University Forestry School, or the Organic Farming School, the Feldbella community, which I know Martha knows, that live around the corner and have been building for many years with natural building materials. I think being able to work in this way to geographically limit the movement of heavy materials, but also include the insights of people working in the local material to shorten the value chains and to really create value and put it in the building and in the landscape. So I don't know if Sophie and Jørn thought that they'd be producing a lot of the materials themselves, but they ended up doing so. You can see Sophie here collecting bulrush fibers, which I think we will see more in our buildings because we'll see more wet landscapes. And Jørn is digging some clay. So the point of clay extraction was evaluated in terms of it was looked at as we could create better habitat, more biodiverse habitat by doing some interventions on the edge of a young woodland. Then you can see the processing, the drying of the clay, and the installation of the rammed clay floor. Local works helped us make the recipes. Sometimes natural buildings is a bit more like cooking. So we actually used the bulrush fiber, we used white normal flour, and here perhaps you remember the geological core scans where we had our idea of trying to communicate this glacial landscape in the building renovation, emerging through the natural pigments and the natural different sand types that we had to work with from the building and from the very red iron-rich sands. And here Ben from Local Works came to train our masons who were very experienced in working with lime, but since clay plasters have fallen out of favor, they were not so comfortable. So here we were doing a workshop with them. And this is a sample board of some of the natural materials that we accumulated during the process. And here is some of the sites that we took the clay from. This is the school. If we talk about the building, we see perhaps in two methodological approaches. The school is, I would say, more of a restoration, and the old barn more a transformation. We use a lot this idea of repair, so constantly questioning what is being told, which stories are available to be experienced when you step into the building, trying to really retain a lot of the existing structure, as much of the existing structure as possible, and to put as little new material as possible. We also, for the building project, defined 4 regenerative principles, which are maybe useful to name. It was that we would prioritize place-based materials, so material localism that involved upcycling or bioregional materials. Everything we did would be based on the idea of this nature restoration, which was part of Hillerskov's identity. We would use bio-based build-ups to replace carbon and toxin-heavy materials, and that we hope that the connection between the landscape and the building could be felt and also measured if this has been succeeded. We actually had to meet a lot of quite strong building regulations, because we have a mixed-use development where there's commercial up onto residential. Here you can see how we've used the floor slab, historic clay infill, which was there. We took it out, sorted and grounded and put it back in. You can also see how we used cow manure for soot stopping in the chimneys. Bricks were recycled on site to create fire and soundproof interior walls where they didn't exist before. The new structure was locally grown Danish timber on a lime cement, no cement, but a limecrete side strip foundation. The interior insulation is done with hemp. We're, along with Build from Aalborg University, we're tracking the moisture, we're tracking off-gassing, but we're also doing anthropological studies. Here you can see the schoolroom almost finished with a non-colored clay plaster from the site and the hemp lime acoustic ceiling. Here you can see how we've recycled the old floorboards to make all the inventory, because we needed a better thermal performance in the floors. Off-cut woods used to build all the furniture. Locally grown Danish timber was used to build the barn and the glass house or orangery. These are still under construction. I will hop forward to some almost finished photographs that nobody else has seen yet. We just got them from the photographer last week. Here you can see the school and the garage in the background. All the existing windows were restored by the carpenters. Likewise with the brickwork. In the side building, which had a more radical transformation, we interpreted the eaves detail and masonry details to allow for the space we needed for the additional insulation. But we tried to keep all the openings that were there as new windows and doors. You can see there was some new brickwork, but we've kept that as legible. You can see a view through the side building and the school, where you look at the clay, rammed clay floor and the old school. This is the barn workshop, which will host cross-disciplinary events and agriculture, science and farming. Here we are standing in the side building, where you are standing on a clay floor, clay plastered walls on the hemp retrofit insulation, and a completely timber ceiling and insulation build up. Some of the furniture in the side building is of new Danish timber, because we didn't have enough of the old floors. Even the lamps, which are made by a Danish artist, are made from site-based clay. Here is the schoolroom, the classroom, which we hope will host a lot of events investigating what it is to be regenerative. And I'm running out of time. This is the entrance hall, also site-based clay and a Swedish sandstone floor. Kitchen made of upcycled timber, clay walls, which hopefully remind you of the first image I showed, and the co-working space on the first floor with the off-cut wood furniture. And this is the orangery, which is the floor is actually upcycled from Rungsted Lund, Karen Blixen's driveway, I believe, Danish grown timber, and linseed oil paint made in Denmark. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing this really inspiring case, and thank you all. So please take a seat again, and I'll invite you back up when we have the time for conversations and questions and answers. Yes. So, over the lately we've seen sort of an increasing dissatisfaction with political sort of climate ambition, and lately we've also seen the industry sort of stepping up and putting pressure on politicians to put tighter regulations on construction. We've seen that in the UK and in Switzerland and in other places, but in Denmark we have a case of that, and that's called the Reduction Roadmap. And I'm happy to welcome Jeppe Krabbe on stage, who's leading the secretariat of the Reduction Roadmap. And you have the mic here. Manual.
Thank you.
Shifting here.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Jeppe Krabbe. I am also an architect, and I work in a company called Effect, who together with another architectural company, Zebra, and the engineering firm Artelia, created this project called the Reduction Roadmap. So I'm going to try and blaze you through what the Reduction Roadmap is and is becoming. The Reduction Roadmap takes a starting point not in how we build, but the climate and climate science, particularly the planetary boundaries, which Stig has already shown, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it. And the sort of the driving idea behind it is this quote from Johan Rockström, that the 2020s is basically the decade where we determine the future for the rest of the century. The question behind was, is it possible to build within the planetary boundaries? And if so, what is that? How do we build within? So the starting point was actually this paper, which is a paper where the planetary boundaries for climate change was quantified. It showed us that here on the left, you have the global annual carbon emissions, 48 billion tons per year, and the safe operating space is showing how much we can emit, and the planet, the natural systems can absorb. So this is a drastic reduction that we have ahead of us. The second question we were trying to answer was, when do we need to get within? And for that, we were looking at the Paris Agreement and the carbon budget for the 1.5 warming. This showed us that we had 6 years at the time when this was started in 2020, and then we would have used our entire global carbon budget for the 1.5 scenario. The idea behind the reduction roadmap is, instead of just keeping on business as usual, we take this serious and reduce our emissions, buying us more time. The challenge is that we are not really doing that. So the science is changing all the time. And 2 years ago, there was a new carbon budget really published, showing that we have actually not reduced. So we now have 3 to 7 years to reduce our global emissions. These have been translated to the way we calculate LCA in Denmark, so that it's actually becoming a tool for when you build. You know, if you want to build within the Paris Agreement and the planetary boundaries, you need your project needs to be within these numbers. Then last year, there was a renegotiation of the Danish carbon cap in the Danish pillage legislation. And we then decided that we would try and see if we could mobilize the industry to support a call that the carbon cap was aligned with the reduction roadmap. And that was quite a task. On the top line you can see here is what was sketched out in the pillage legislation. And then below here you can see the reduction roadmap and the limit, or the value that we should have in 2025, which was what we were negotiating. And at the time, the cap was at 12 kilos per CO2 per square meter per year, despite that we were already building an average at 9.5. So it was not really a cap, if you like. And we were then showing that the reduction roadmap was actually pushing us that we should have a cap all the way down at maximum 5.8 kilos. So still quite a bit of reduction. But there's a good message in this. The message is that in 25, it would have been possible to align the legislation with the Paris Agreement. It's not over yet, if you like. So we were trying to mobilize in the industry. We made a call to actors in the Danish building industry to support this proposal, and had an online campaign, which received, to our surprise, a huge support. We had municipalities, we had architectural firms, we had construction companies. Like, the whole value chain was represented in this, more than 630 companies and organizations supporting our call to the politicians. We were also together with different actors that were supporting. We created a database to show that it's possible, because that was one of the first criticisms we were receiving, was this a very nice idea, but it's not really realistic. So we made a database showing that this is actually possible. All of these projects had already been built, and they were all built with respecting the boundary we were proposing. So the sort of the conclusion to that was that without an ambition carbon limit, it's possible for the few. You know, when you have the right contractor meeting the right building owner, the right advisor, on the right project on the right day. If we had a carbon limit in the legislation, it would be possible. So everybody, the discussion, should we do this or not, would be over. So what was the outcome? How did the politicians receive this? Here is the graph you see before, and the call that we had was to land at 5.8. And we were getting quite close. We landed at 7.1. And then there was drafted values for the coming reductions, which to our disappointment was, you can see the sort of the speed of reductions was cut in half compared to what it was before. So in that respect, we have quite a bit of work ahead of us to get the politicians to understand that we need to reduce faster. So if we want to sum it up, the bill legislation could have been aligned with the Paris Agreement. Or as Antonio Guterres says, we need to get real about this stuff. Then 2 weeks ago we released a new report which we called Beyond the Roadmap, and that is basically taking a starting point. And here you can see the values that are proposed with the roadmap, and then how much new build we can keep building if we adhere to these values. This is what the building legislation has given us, and given that, we have to reduce our new build a lot. And there is a what do you call that? There is a sort of a weird conflict mentally between what's being said by the politicians, that we have plenty of time before we need to reach net zero, and what the scientific community is saying us, which is we have 5 years to get down to net zero. We discuss a lot in the industry different solutions. One of the most common one is we should just be more energy efficient, and that's all grand. We're quite good at doing that. The problem is just our energy consumption is still rising. In Denmark, on the left you have our territorial emissions in 1990 and in 2022. So our politicians are really proud, saying we have managed to reduce our emissions. Except we have not. We have been really good at exporting our emissions. If you take the total emissions from the Danish economy, they have actually increased since 1990 by 6%. And also we haven't been able to separate our economic growth from our emissions. So the idea of green growth, there is no examples of that actually being working in practice. And here, this is a graph that's showing the ecological footprint and the biocapacity of the Earth. So the overshoot here is we're using more nature than the nature can give us, if you like, and we have done that since 1970. We're also having an issue that we're talking about sustainability. We normally talk about just CO2 emissions, but that's a minor, a fraction of the issue we're actually looking at. So what we did with Beyond the Roadmap was we tried to sort of expand the image and to work with all the planetary boundaries. So we have been in touch with the Stockholm Resilience Center, who gave us a good message, which is that if we assess and deal with climate change and biodiversity, called biosphere integrity in the planetary boundaries, then we actually address all the planetary boundaries. If you reduce your impact within climate change and biodiversity, it's not possible to not you will also address your impact in the rest of the planetary boundaries. So the Beyond the Roadmap is going beyond buildings. It's looking at the whole construction industry as a part of the polar crisis. We're going beyond net zero, I'll show you in a second, and we're going beyond just CO2. And this was the basis for what we now call the butterfly framework. So as you see here, this is the original roadmap where we need to reduce our emissions. But we have a huge carbon debt, like the atmosphere is full of CO2. We need to get within the planetary boundaries, not just, this is just being neutral, but it's not doing up for what we have done so far. So we need to sequester huge amounts of carbon. And the good news here is that we can do that. We have globally, we have 15% of nature back left, and we need to reach 30% to fulfill the Montreal Agreement, which is like the Paris Agreement for biodiversity. If we do for our climate impact, our biodiversity impact, and reach within the planetary boundaries, which is up at 50%, this can actually give us these reductions in CO2 because the land will sequester carbon. Yeah, this is basically just what I just said. But the really good news here is that if you take Denmark as a case, in 16 years we could sequester our entire carbon down. We could basically be not just net zero, but be so net climate positive that all the emissions that we have done historically will be sequestered. And then we're just a very quick story of what we're doing next. We have launched Reduction Roadmap now as a think tank, where we are working on finding ways that the housing and construction industry can operate within the planetary boundaries. We are hoping to spread abroad. Sweden is the first country that has calculated a reduction roadmap that is not for Denmark, and we are in touch with partners in other countries. So if any of you out there are from any of these countries or elsewhere, please get in touch. We would really like the project is created open source, and we really hope for this to spread. And everybody can support. If you want to support our work, you can go to our website and sign up as a supporter. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for these very different approaches. You can stay here. Different approaches to making us stay within the planetary boundaries. I would like to invite you up on stage, all of you. Stig, Sofie, Justine, and Marlin will be moderating this session. Do you want this one? I will go.
I can share a mic. Yeah.
We have one also.
Yeah. Sharing is caring. Fantastic! It's so satisfying to see things happening, not just in numbers, but in a reused brick and clay, and really heartwarming presentations. Thank you all. One thing that while I'm speaking, I really want to encourage you to formulate those questions in your mind and raise your hands whenever you'd like. You are welcome to contribute. This is the general idea actually with this session. I just while you're thinking, I'm just gonna do a short reflection. Is how you are all very much invested in time, in thinking in time. We heard the Stig, you are standing on this funding of 150 years, dating back to the 18th century, and also inviting knowledge and all the sort of summing up of all the educational years and everything that goes into that. So we also had the figure 40 years since your parents invested in the regenerative idea farm. Let's call it an idea farming. Of course, prior to them, they were also standing on the tradition of natural lands and forests and old buildings. And Justine, as you're a young you're representing a young practice, but your methods are among the oldest in the practice, showing that we are relearning. We're in a process now of unlearning and relearning, and how you benefit and nurture that knowledge bank. And also, Jeppe, when you this is when things become a bit more worrying. As you said, you had your time frames are shrinking. You had 7 to 12 years after, you know, and that had to be revised to 3 to 7 years action space, and all that's worrying. So you're all thinking in time. You're there in your minds. How is your well, how can this be a question? It's like time is a sort of aggregated wealth of knowledge. How are you sort of paying back to that bank? What's your relationship and in terms of inserting and extracting from the knowledge bank of time? This is up for grabs.
I don't know exactly about the bank, but I feel it's an interesting sort of this dialectic that we need to speed up slowing down, if you like. And I think that was where it was really inspiring to see your projects, because I think like seeing a project where this sort of care and attention like is given, I think is a key to what we need to do. We shouldn't be apathic and not do stuff. We should be more careful with what we do.
Just is this on? Yeah. Just a reflection there. Just during the Second World War, we kind of demonstrated as a society, as individual countries, that we could produce so immense amounts of war material that after the war we had to find other outlets for that production capacity. So we entered what Johan Rockström refers to as the Great Acceleration. This is going on. This has been going on since the 1950s, and we've been accelerating for 70 years. And I think that looking back at those 70 years, the acceleration caused us to forget a lot of what went before that, what materials we used, the relations we had, both to the grounds and to our immediate surroundings. So I think that now looking forward, maybe another 70 years, and we have scientists saying that we don't have 70 more years, and that in 70 years we might be facing social collapse, and that's, I think, extremely worrying and extremely. It's basically a call to action. So I think that maybe it's time to stop the acceleration, as Jeppe said. Maybe it's time to think a little bit more. And maybe it's time to do things a little bit more deliberate.
I think the idea of time is a hopeful concept that we can learn a bit more empathy from. Also empathy to maybe things we don't know so much, or times that where there were no humans, for example, but also forward thinking about our actions and what are we doing now, how it affects our ancestors, are we being good ancestors? I think these questions need to be the philosophical tools that create quite a quick system change that will result in all these, new ideas, or looking back to go forward, or bio-based byggeri reduction roadmap, Hillsgo. They can be examples, but we need to very quickly step into a much larger, huge system change at governmental level on a global scale. So I think time is useful to communicate why we need to do that and how we might be able to do that.
I don't have any comments.
No comments.
All good.
Yes, please.
So, this one. Okay, so hi, I'm Johan from Kjellander Sjöberg Architects. I have a question addressing to, I guess, all of you, but you spoke early and also now you talked about that we need a reduction of how much we build, as well as kind of changing how we build things, of course. And quite naturally, all the good examples of how to build new is quite small scale and quite local. It's not strange because it's something new and we have to start small. But do you feel that I mean, do you see that we also need more space? Like, I don't know how Denmark is. Are your population growing? Maybe people are moving into Copenhagen, or maybe we can take in more immigrants, for example. So, is this something you know already? If we need more space, and is this also something that you work with, like that aspect of the question as well? Thank you.
Yes.
That's a good question. In Realdania, we have 3 main initiatives right now supporting the transition of the building industry. We have the one I just told you about, the pathways to bio-based construction. We have another one looking at circular reuse of materials, and we have a third one coming up that's called Bevar mere, or preserve more. So basically looking at the potential of the already existing buildings. How much could we renovate? How much could we refurbish? And could we actually address our needs through that? So we had an analysis made as to which buildings have a surplus capacity that we're not using. And we had an idea that maybe it would be rooftops, maybe it would be abandoned schools or industry, but as a matter of fact, it turned out that the by far greatest underutilized typology in Denmark is the single-family housing. We have so many single-family houses that are 160, 180 square meters, living 2 people. Or even if it's older houses, maybe 130, 120 square meters, 1 person. And we have, even if you get into geographies outside the bigger cities, you have even abandoned houses. So what we need to do is really to rethink, reconfigure these houses to figure out, can we live together, more people on the same place? Could we, by doing so, could we prevent loneliness? Could we further quality of life? Could we create communities where we now see just really high hedges and people sitting alone in their single-family houses?
Yeah, I can. You can read more about this reconfiguration strategies that will be found in one of the articles about material in the Sustain Nordic texts. That was just a comment. Thank you so much, Stig. Anyone else?
I don't think we need to build new. I think for now we need to stop demolishing. So I think there should be an immediate demolition ban set into place for structures that are not at detriment to human safety or ecological safety. I think there should be a preservation law as the basic law that everything needs to be preserved, and you'd have to put up a very good argument whether or not it should be demolished.
To say, if we take the climate perspective, we definitely don't need more buildings. We don't need more consumption.
I'm waiting for. We have only 2 minutes, so any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, there you are. Sorry about
yeah.
that.
I really liked your slide about comparison of bio-based materials and, I would say, more artificial. So I was wondering, for customers, would it be more affordable to buy an apartment in a building with bio-based materials, and how it will affect the lifespan of building, its durability?
Maybe I can start there, and the others can maybe give their say. In terms of cost, today it is more costly to use bio-based materials because they're much more made by hand, and labor in this part of the world is fairly expensive. But we see, as for instance Ecolution are doing here in Skåne, they're actually creating a fairly inexpensive, on a global scale, fairly inexpensive plant, and lowering the cost of the material drastically. So maybe with relatively small investments, we can drive the cost down. And what was your other question? Sorry. You had 2 questions, right?
Yes, of lifespan.
The durability.
Yes.
Yes. 2 years ago, I was in Norway. They have 800 years old wooden structures.
We think that humans need to relearn how to be involved with their surroundings. So hopefully, when we're not all working to create profit, to create growth, to put our the planet under, maybe we have a bit more time to learn how to maintain and fix and repair. And that way, yes, I think that bio-based materials are very durable in that they can be repaired. Something that maintenance-free, this idea that has gone around for a while, is just dangerous. It means toxic materials that are not with the ability to be repaired and that are completely controlled with systems, industrial systems that humans and other beings have no agency in.
I just want to one last question, and it's to Sophie. This, as you say, learning and learning over time. Do you think, Sophie, that we are coming back, and this is also for you, Justine, that your farmhouse, the school particularly, it's amazing that it's a school. Do you think this will be the sort of new cathedral? And by that, I mean that cathedrals formerly were not just building sites, but learning sites. They were the sort of universities of generations upon generations of builders. How do you relate to that?
I definitely hope that we, with this project, will have an impact, because that's why we've done it, to both research on how these materials work, but also how we can accelerate the use of these materials. So if we're not going to be a cathedral, I don't want to be part of the project, because we need to hopefully drive change with this project. Also, because when you talk about time, one of the things I think about is also the financial aspect of this project, because right now, for us as owners of this project, it's been super expensive. Both we've used a lot of resources, both financially, but also time consuming, harvesting the materials ourselves. So I'm also really hoping that we can somehow find ways of making this more doing it in a more better way. I don't know. I'm in lack of
with
words.
Lots of dedication.
Yeah.
Of course. And speaking about time is up.
Okay.
And we're gonna have lunch. I'll
Yes.
give the mic back to you. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you all. So maintain and repair and condense and stop building new. That's kind of the conclusion, I guess, from this session. So this concludes the morning session, and we are now going downstairs for lunch. Your name tags is the sort of access to lunch, so please keep them or make a new one. We'll be back up here at 1 o'clock. Yes. So enjoy your lunch and see you back here.